You might need to give me the power to share my screen. It says it's been disabled. It's usually just a default thing they do.
Try now, see if you can.
All right, that worked.
Perfect.
So let's do it. All right, everybody. Today we are talking about onboarding, which is so valuable. And it's also been one of the things I have been trying to work on in my own business, making onboarding easier for my own clients and a better experience. So it's very timely. And if you really need onboarding, whether things are fast or slow in your business, because if they're slow right now, this is a good time to revisit those onboarding procedures. And if they're fast, you need to implement, like if it's really busy right now, you need to implement them right away, because you will feel much more organized and your clients will have a better experience too. So if we have not met, I am Laura. I love doing these monthly training webinars. We're always open to hear ideas about topics that would be relevant to you all too. But today we are chatting about onboarding. So I'm going to dive right into it. So client onboarding simply refers to how you welcome new clients into your business. What happens after they sign the contract, after they pay the deposit? What does that look like? And a lot of people like skip over this, right? Because for you, it is the best time. Like you're excited, you close the client, you got paid either a deposit or the full amount, or you've locked in this amount of income for the month. You're good to go and get started working. But you might also have other client stuff on your plate right now. And so you may not immediately dive into an onboarding process. You may be, you'll be like, I'll get to this in 3 days. The problem is that we need to make sure that our clients feel comfortable, that they understand what is happening next. And this not only resets their comfort level, but it also reduces the amount of emails, phone calls, texts, Slack messages, all the things, updates, because onboarding is where we tell our clients what this process is going to look like. And it cuts down a lot of confusion or people trying to railroad you or extend the scope creep beyond it. So this is your client's first experience working with you. They don't really know who you are. Even if you came through as a referral, they're not sure what to expect. They are also the most nervous. So at the same time, you are the most excited, your client is the most nervous about this, because they're like, did I make a mistake? Did I choose the right person? Have I overpaid for this? What if they don't deliver? So this is a chance for us to come in and re-highlight all the reasons why they picked us in the first place by showing them that we are organized and prepared. So onboarding also matters because it sets the tone for your whole working relationship. So many clients have the potential to go off the rails. And most of the time when that happens, it's because they're confused, right? So onboarding is really critical for telling a client a couple of things: how you're going to communicate with me, what you can expect, what our timeline is, what to do if there's an emergency or there's a problem. And it really kind of tells the client what you will and won't be available for, right? So in a subtle way, you can use the onboarding process to tell them, hey, I don't check my Facebook messages, so don't communicate with me through there. I don't check my email after hours, so you can send messages after hours, but I won't reply to them. So it sets the tone of the working relationship and hopefully gets you off on the right foot so that you can avoid some of these problems. I bring this up because boundaries really matter. And a lot of times we only learn about what our boundaries are after a client has tripped one of them. So we'll be like, yeah, I really don't want people texting me on my personal phone, or I don't want someone emailing me on the weekend, or sending me invites to a company-wide meeting 30 minutes before it starts and expecting me to show up to it. And so onboarding is where we tell them, this is how I'm going to communicate with you. This is the turnaround time you can expect. And it kind of, like, there's no confusion, right? There's no like, oh, I'm going to send this invite to you for a meeting that happens in 30 minutes, because you've already told the client in onboarding what is going to happen and how you're going to connect and share information. It also puts your client at ease. It just tells your client everything is going to be okay. I'm going to do the bulk of the work on this project, but I still want you to feel like you know what is going on. So it puts them at ease rather than them feeling like, okay, I signed and now what? In their mind, this may be the only big project they're working on at this point in time. For you, you're like, this is client number 5 or 6. Like, I do this all the time. I don't really think about it as a big deal, but to them, they've put a lot of money on the line to hire a total stranger to do something for them. And so we want to do everything we can to put them at ease. And the fact that we can simultaneously protect some of our boundaries at that time is why client onboarding matters so much. Remember too, that you may not be the only freelancer your client has ever worked with. They might have been burned before. And so it's not our job to correct all the wrongs of freelancers who burned them in the past, but we can put their mind at ease right away by leaning into that and being like, here's how you know working with me is going to be professional. I'm going to deliver on deadline. I'm going to have good communication with you. So if you've picked up those cues from your client, and especially if they said it in your onboarding call, oh, we've hired writers before, or the last virtual assistant didn't work out, you already know in the back of your mind, there's something about that where it fell apart before. I want to make sure this client understands that that doesn't happen with me. So an easy way to get started with onboarding, which requires no software or anything complex like that, is to create a welcome packet. This is literally just a PDF or a Google Doc that you are sharing with some of the most helpful information your client might need to do. Now, you can repurpose different welcome packets for different services or packages that you offer. It's very helpful if you do the same kind of service over and over. So you don't need to get into the granular details of, on day one, I will read your customer voice information and type up my notes and questions. We're really using it to share some high level things that apply to all of our clients. What to expect, typical turnaround times, how to reach me. The best way to reach me is through our shared Trello board or at the following email address. Here's the timeline of what we're working on. This is valuable to share too if they are going to be a part of the process with revisions. A lot of clients don't realize that sometimes their publication date, their website launch date gets thrown off by them. I'm in this process right now with a client. Like, I manage all the development for their monthly blog work, but when they get a week behind on reviewing and approving content, I can't publish that content. And so it took some training of their team of, do you kind of see how this is all connected? I can't meet my timeline if you don't meet your timeline, and then adapting and building those systems to align with that. And then if there are specific places you want them to submit questions or revisions, I just wrapped up a big project redesigning a website for my own business. And I was unclear at the beginning, like, hey, how am I supposed to tell you what photos I don't like, what copy I want changed out? And so they made me a video of their tool. Hey, here's how you use markup. Here's how you leave comments. This is the best way to communicate with us. So my expectations as a client were very clear. Oh, don't email them. They actually don't want that. They don't want me making a video going page by page through their website. They want my text comments in this specific markup tool. Another way to capitalize on the onboarding process is to do kickoff calls. If this is a very involved process, if it is a nervous client, if it is a lot of money, I recommend doing a kickoff call. They're anywhere between 15 to 60 minutes, just depending on what the project looks like. Yes, sometimes you may be repeating a lot of information that you said on the sales call or in your proposal, but kickoff calls put that client at ease because you're recapping and they might not have remembered, right? Especially if they were reviewing multiple proposals, they don't remember the details of yours. So it's helpful to just reiterate some of the most important information. If you don't feel like you need to have a kickoff call, I still like to send an email to my clients telling them, here's what to expect. In the next 10 days, I'm going to draft your copy. After that point in time, you will have 7 days to review it. Leave any revisions and comments in the following way for me to see it. And from there, I'll need another 5 business days to turn it back around to you, at which point the remainder of the funds are due. So it's just kind of that high level recap of like, here's what we need to do to stay on track. And here's how I want you to communicate with me. So kickoff calls are helpful. That should say change psychologically in your client. If they're nervous coming into the call, on the call, you can actually kind of see them relax. You can hear it if it's an audio only call, because you're just recapping most important information. Hey, I've got you. I'm organized. I do this all the time. This is a best practice that I see working over and over really well for my clients. They do go from nervous to trusting on this call if you handle it effectively. I do like to set their expectations before a kickoff call. If I have a really involved project, I'm going to set an agenda. I'm going to send in questions in advance. If it's a simple project, I'm just going to say the kickoff call is my chance to confirm details, to ask a couple questions of you, and to allow you to ask any remaining questions or share any additional materials that I need. So it just it gives them that forum to have a voice and to express concerns if they have it. And you can reiterate what your process looks like if they forgot or got confused, as a reminder, because, my original proposal said we would start on May 1st, but because you just signed the contract on, April 28th, I'm pushing that back by 5 days, or whatever other info you need to share that's helpful for the client to know what's going on. So on your kickoff call, there's information to get, and then there's information to give. So some of the kinds of information we get on the kickoff call in onboarding: brand guidelines. Hey, I need a login for your website. You need to add me to your LastPass account. I can't access your Hootsuite, whatever. Contact numbers and details. Is there anyone else I'm going to be communicating with on this project? Is anyone else reviewing my work? So as you're grabbing your information, one thing I love to do is give them some of the questions in advance. They don't have to review it, but that way they can look at it and they show up to the call prepared. And you can also document this on a shared Google Doc as you go. So because you'll forget too, you'll forget that the client said, oh, I'm in my car right now, I can't send you that login. You could just note that in your shared document. They're going to send me the login later this afternoon. That way you can reflect back on it. It's also helpful because that document is shared with them, so they can go back and look at it if they had questions about your process. And I also love to turn things yellow when I'm waiting on something from them. Like, hey, I can't move forward with this project because I cannot get into this particular account, or because you sent me the Google Doc, but the permissions don't work on it. So I like to highlight that. And then I may also send them an email about it, but it's sort of a self reminder to me, because I'm working with multiple clients at a time. Oh yeah, that's the reason I didn't start on this particular project. So use highlighted text to tell them, hey, this one thing isn't working. We still need to get this addressed. Now on the call, I said we were going to get and we're going to give some of the information we're going to give: how to reach out to me. How do I want you to communicate with me? I don't want you calling me out of the blue. I don't want you text messaging me. I don't want you sending me a LinkedIn or a Facebook message or an Instagram DM. I want you to communicate in the shared document we have, on our project management, or over email. And that's really align that with your process and what works for you. Tell them more about your turnaround times. I also will let clients know if they're booking me at a time where I'm getting ready to go on vacation. That's happening right now. So I'm telling all of my clients, I have to have your material by X day because I'm going on vacation, and otherwise you're going to have to wait 2.5 weeks for me to come back and get started on your project. So it doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to say, I will have this to you by Thursday at 2 p.m., but something even as simple as, it takes me 3 to 4 business days to turn around this type of project or to get you your first draft. And then if there are any boundaries that you need to set, this is very specific to the individual freelancer, but if you have specific things like, I only check my email certain times a day, or I'm only accessible certain hours of the day, or if you send me a message any other way than outside our shared Trello board, I'm not going to see it. Like, whatever those boundaries are, let them know. The client may also bring up information that you didn't discuss before. This is common when it comes to things like meetings, and we may have given a quote without thinking we were going to be needed in meetings. And so this is also a chance to course correct and say, that wasn't included in my proposal, and I'm not comfortable with it, or I am comfortable, but it's going to change the scope of our agreement. And then if you're going to use any joint project management tool, Google Docs, Slack channel, whatever, make sure that they have access at that point in time. Just do it live while they're on the call. I do this a lot, like any other access issues. If I'm doing Facebook ads for a client, please just share your screen with me and I'll walk you through how to add me as the ad manager. And we will, it'll make it a lot easier rather than having to go, oh, hey, I tried to get into your account and I couldn't later. So deal with those access issues live to respect their time. We also have some information that might still need to be decided on the call itself. So when things are due, if that deadline has changed, how will the review process work? Do you need them to give you feedback in a particular way? Do they expect that giving you 1 day notice of review is appropriate enough? You can course correct that. and then decide whether or not you need any more meetings. I try to keep those only for my big projects, my VIP clients, the people who really respect the time on meetings. For smaller projects, I don't want to be doing a lot of meetings and phone calls. So I try to clarify that on the kickoff call and say, it sounds to me like we don't need any more meetings. If that changes, we can revisit that and do a 30-minute touch, like check in and touch base meeting. But for now, I'm going to communicate with you by XYZ, by sending you a report every Friday, by updating you in the Slack channel, etc. Now, after the call, take the notes that you wrote, because you should be taking notes in that shared document or for yourself, and write those next steps in written form, just to reiterate the most important details. You don't need to re-say everything that you already talked about, but we do want to cover some of the basics: when things are due, how reviews will work, if there were items still pending after your call, they needed to add a credit card to something or something they didn't want to do live on the call. Recap that, because people will not remember. A lot of times clients are taking these meetings and they aren't taking notes at the same time, or they're traveling or whatever. So it's kind of on us to grab those details. And then recap any key links or things that they need to know. Hey, as a reminder, here is the link to the Google Doc or spreadsheet where I will be tracking our progress. Even if you send it in the proposal, even if you already sent it over email, send it again. The reason is to save yourself from future emails. So that way, when the client has a question, they're searching inside their email box for your name or the subject line of your email and using that to self troubleshoot, rather than coming to you and saying, hey, what was that Google Doc again? It's like, it's all in the email. I outlined all of it for you. Okay. So that was a speed crash course in kind of like the strategy behind onboarding. Now, there are tools that you can use to help you. Honeybook, Dubsado, they are paid tools. You can go that route if you want to, and you find it easier. You can do things like questionnaires, forms they need to complete. You can send your invoice, your contract, your deposit details, all of that through there. But you'll still probably need to create a welcome packet or send that recap email or do that kickoff call. So I'd love to know if any of you have questions about onboarding. It can be specifics or it can just be in general. Kind of the point of today's presentation was to do that overview. What are the things you should be thinking about? And then find the method that works best for you for capturing all of that data. And it may be different by client.
I have a question I'll ask you, Laura. What do you do if a client wants you to use all of their technology? Like, you said that, you're working with a web designer and they have a way of receiving feedback, but what if you're onboarding with a new client and they want to use all their own systems and not the systems you have in place?
For me, that's going to depend on the scope of the project. So if this is $1,000 project, I'm not joining your company Slack. I'm not joining your company Basecamp. I'm not doing all, I don't need to be integrated at that level, because it's just too much of a hassle for me. It's another login to keep track of. It's another thing to be responsible for. So I kind of do that on a project by project basis. I just wrapped up a massive project. It was a $25,000 project. And we just the company I was working with, they didn't have a system. And so I suggested it when we got started. I said, okay, we've got 2 writers working on this project. We really need to make sure that we're super organized. I think we create a task tracking spreadsheet in Google Docs, so you can always see what number me and the other writer are on. And I recommend we do everything in Google Docs so we can write in suggestion mode. And that way you can easily leave comments and we're not worrying about which version. So that's another option too, is to try to convince your client that your system might be better if possible, or to say to them, hey, I'm really the social media manager. I just create and publish the content. So if there's other stuff you want me to be a part of, I'm going to have to weigh out whether I even want to do that or not, because maybe I don't even want to be the one scheduling your social media, or it's a budget saving measure for me to just create it. In that case, I'm going to create it in the way that I want to create it. And you can take those files and do with them what you want. But for something smaller or something where I really don't need to be involved, I might give a little bit of pushback on that. With bigger clients, it totally just makes sense to join their systems. And yes, it can be annoying. My biggest client, I have a separate LastPass, a separate Outlook, a separate ClickUp account, but I just use different windows to kind of keep track of that during the day. But because it's a huge project, it's like, it's okay. I'm willing to take on that additional burden because everyone else in the team is organized in there and I don't want to be the outlier.
That makes sense. And Christina, I love the point you brought up is sometimes, if you do join a company's systems, that it makes them feel like maybe you're an employer versus a freelance business owner. So to that point, Laura, how do you keep the boundaries when you're working with clients and, you are joining their systems, the larger clients? How do you, keep those boundaries in place where they're, there's not scope creep and they're, you're getting pinged at midnight and things like that?
This is where you want to get to know this client as much as possible before you work with them. And if you feel that red flag issue in your gut, ask to speak with other freelancers who work with their team. Just say, can you put me in touch with someone who's been working with your team for a while as a contractor? Because I've experienced this in both good and bad ways. So that big client I was just talking about with those separate accounts, I talked to someone else on her team and she was like, oh yeah, we work whatever hours we want. Occasionally we have meetings, but she really doesn't care when you do the work, just as long as you get it done and you document it. And I was like, ding, 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 that's a freelance role. Another client where I talked to multiple contractors on their team, they all vented separately when asked very general questions about what work was like. They were giving me all the bad red flags. They're like, yeah, we have to do a lot of admin work we're not paid for. We have to attend meetings where we don't participate, but we sit there muted and we don't get paid as much per hour for that. And I was like, no. So that helped save me. Like I straight up told that company, this is an employee role. Like everything these people have told me is that it's structured as an employee role and I'm not comfortable with it. So do your research first. And then if you get in that situation and it starts happening, you might say like, hey, I understand the ease of adding me to your Slack channel. However, because I have 7 clients, I can't be in Slack all day. So as long as you're treating it as a tool like email, where I will eventually see the message and eventually respond, but there's no crazy rules around, we expect a 30-minute response time, that's really treating someone more like an employee rather than a contractor. So a gentle reminder to most clients is necessary. In all my years of freelancing, I've only ever had to go beyond that twice. And there's 3 letters you can say that will stop most clients from doing this, and it's IRS. And so I will usually say, in order for me to be classified as an independent contractor, the IRS requires a couple of things in my working relationships with clients. And then I kind of explain why what they're proposing may cross that line and why it causes problems for my business. So I'm not directly calling them out and saying like, yeah, it's actually illegal if you do that. And, but I'm just saying like, for the way I run my business, I can't do that because I'm classified as an independent contractor. It's the way my company has to run. So you probably won't get that a lot, but you may have to educate your clients about what is crossing that line. Hey, actually, I can't be on the Slack channel and keep it open all day because that's more like an employee role where you're expecting me to be available, reviewing it, responding. And then I'm not in control of my own work. I'm not in control of my schedule. So let's come up with something that helps you feel like you can reach out to me when needed, but also gives me the flexibility to respond when I'm able to respond.
Awesome. That makes sense. Does anybody else have any questions? Feel free to unmute yourself or drop it in the comments or the chat pane.
Oh yeah, Alyssa, I want to call out your question here about stating your boundaries in a nice way that doesn't come off in a demanding or negative tone. There's a great phrase to use for this. When a client is pushing those boundaries, I say something like, that's an interesting thought. I want to say I've worked with hundreds of clients in the last 10 years. And one of the best practices I have seen in my most successful client projects is X. And X is usually the thing that I would rather them do rather than what they are pushing for me to do. So maybe they're asking for daily meetings at 9 a.m. for me to check in. And I'm going to say, I understand you want to feel like you're up to date with the project. However, the my most successful projects working with clients are when we're both able to focus on the many things on our plate and still be in communication where necessary. So I propose a spreadsheet or project management tool or a weekly recap call or a report or whatever. And you can tell just in how they respond to that, like, can I work with this client? Because they're like, no, it has to be 9 a.m. calls. Okay, great. I tried to work with you. I'm out. I'm not part of this project. But if they hear, oh, actually, this freelancer has a ton more experience working with other people. And of course, I want to be like their most successful projects. I want to be one of those clients who feels really good. They will usually try not to put themselves in the other category. And that way it takes the pressure off you because you're not saying, you have to do it this way because it's my way. You're saying, well, I've worked with a lot of clients and you know what really works is this, and just kind of let it hang there and see what they think about it.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. I haven't even thought about it in that way, but it definitely is the best way to go about it. Yeah, that was really helpful, Laura. Thank you.
Yeah.
I got one. I got a question. Have you ever had a client where you start working with them and you realize that they've really been like burned by freelancers in the past and they're like really edgy and they're like, this is my last chance at success. And like, if we don't accomplish everything this week, the whole world will end.
Yes. So there's two things to do with this. First, we want to ask about it before we commit to the project. It can be as simple as, have you ever worked with freelancers before? Or this happens a lot on calls with new clients. They will say something like, we've been burned before. We just let our fifth writer go. That automatically tells me I need to ask for more details. So I'll say, can you tell me a little bit more about why that didn't work out? It's like that last thing we were talking about. I don't care so much about whatever the reason is the freelancer left. I want to hear how the client phrases it. If the client's like, yeah, they were a disaster, everything they ever did was wrong, I'm kind of like, that's very rare, right? Like most professional freelancers, they're not a disaster across the board. And it says more about your hiring process if they were a complete mess. I'm also listening if I hear things like the last 4 freelancers we hired were awful. None of them worked out, because there's one common denominator with that many professional people, and it's the client. So I'm trying to figure out, is there a hiring process problem here, or is this client unmanageable? And so I ask more about that. And I'll even ask things like, what would success look like for you? What's going to make you feel more comfortable working with a freelancer again? I'm not guaranteeing I can do all those things, but I want to work with you and see if we can come up with a good compromise. So the first thing is figure out, can they even be worked with? Because if you're hearing those major red flags, every freelancer we've ever had was horrible, everyone quits after 3 months, like that's more indicative of like a internal problem. But if they say something like, we just don't know what we're doing, we, especially with virtual assistants, like a lot of people hire VAs, they have no clue what they're doing. They don't onboard the VA the right way. And so the VA inevitably fails. And it's really the client's fault because they don't have a good hiring, screening, and training process. So that's what you're asking more questions about. And then if you do decide you can work with them, that's when we want to do a lot of hand holding and a lot of the onboarding stuff in documents. The other thing that works really well when you have a client who's been burned before, reiterate how professional you are. Oh yeah, I've worked with 200 clients doing this same thing. Or here's some additional testimonials from my clients on these kinds of projects. That sort of social proof can calm them down a little bit, but just do be prepared. And you also kind of have to be prepared, like if there is something in their process where you may have to come back and stand up for yourself. And internally you're going, oh, I see why the other freelancers left. This team is extremely disorganized and difficult to work with. You don't need to come right out and say that, but you might initially address it as, I'm noticing some things that mean our communication is breaking down, and I have some suggestions for how we can improve that. So we don't always need to like attack them with it. My general theory is, let's try to work with the client until they've given me a really solid reason or repeated instances of the same thing where they show they're not going to change. Like if I made an effort and I've gone, I've tried with this client and whatever I do, they just will not review things in a timely manner. And that drives me crazy. So I feel good about letting go of this client.
Awesome. Thank you for that answer. Does anybody else have any questions before we go today? Okay. I wanted to thank Laura once again for a great session. We always appreciate our time with you. I also wanted to mention that I am so excited about some of the programs that we are working on here at Noumena. And one of the ways that everybody on the call can help us is by filling out this short survey that I'm going to drop a link to in the chat. It will take maybe 2 to 5 minutes, and it will just really help us with feedback and working on some of the things that we want to present to the community. So if you will take a minute and fill out that survey. And Laura, thank you so much again. Laura, I actually just did a podcast that dropped today. You can go to her LinkedIn and find it with our founder, Andre. And so you can kind of hear a little bit of the heart of Noumena and why we are here and what we want to do with freelancers and how our freelancer community can help us with the movement that we are creating and make some change in an industry, in an area that's needed disruption for a long time. So really excited. Thanks again, Laura.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Laura.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.